Dr. Browning started off as a Navy pilot, retiring as a captain, and serving as the director of the Navy's Global Leadership and Policies Program. Afterwards, Dr. Browning held several critical leadership positions, such as the chief of the Library of Congress's Corporate University. He was also a professor of behavioral science on the faculty of the Eisenhower College at NDU, and ultimately served as the chairman of the Department of Strategic Leadership there. Currently, Dr. Browning serves as the president of the Browning Leadership Institute. Please join me in a warm Air War College welcome to Dr. Jim Browning.
When you're an operational leader, your focus is internal to the organization. It's trying to get the mission done, meet or exceed your stakeholders' expectations, or to put bombs on target, shall we say, in combat. And most of the problems that you see at the operational level have been seen somewhere before. So there is usually a logical approach for solving the problems you face at the operational level. But leading at the senior level is fundamentally different. Now, you may think it's just a matter of scale. Sure, you're going to have increased scale. You're going to have a wider span of control. You're going to have more entities and resources that you're going to be responsible for. But when you think of the big picture, it's probably only about 5% of the strategic challenges that a senior leader faces. The challenges you face at the senior level are extraordinary. See, most of the problems that you face, like I said, you've seen before at the operational level. Most of the challenges you face at the senior level have never been seen before. And some of them are wicked. Now, what do I mean by wicked? Wicked means there are no known solutions. How do you solve what's happening in Cuba? How do you solve the polarization that's taking place in the United States? How do you solve what's happening in Afghanistan? How do you solve what's going on in the South China Sea? How do you solve climate change or all the various things that are going on around the world today? The point is that these are wicked problems. There are no known solutions. And when you try to solve them, you may even make them more wicked, or you create additional wicked problems. Also, at the senior level, most of your decisions are consequential. I mean, when you make a decision at the operational level, you can get pretty much feedback within a day or two whether or not you made the right decision. Not true at the senior level. Let's say I'm the Secretary of the Navy and I want to build an aircraft carrier. The last one cost $13 billion and it took 10 years to build. What's combat going to be like 10 years from now? I won't know whether I made a correct decision until I'm way out of office. Plus, did I spend that $13 billion on the right thing? These are consequential decisions that you make. Now, you have a lot of roles and responsibilities as a senior leader, but you have two primary ones. And those primary ones is, one is to make sure your organization is accomplishing its mission and maintaining its competitive advantage today. And the other major role and responsibility is to constantly change your organization so it remains relevant, maintains its competitive advantage into the future 5 and 10 years from now. So you have this paradox of balance that you have to deal with. On one hand, you're trying to keep your organization stable because that's how it functions well. On the other hand, you've got to constantly change it to make sure it remains relevant to what's going on in the external environment. So what's the best approach for trying to deal with these two major responsibilities you have to execute at the senior level? And I would argue it's the art and practice of strategic leadership. So what is strategic leadership? Well, it's easier to describe than it is to define. But strategic leadership is essentially having a focus on your organization to make sure it's accomplishing its mission, while spending almost every senior leader that I've interviewed in the executive, they spend 50% or more of their time looking in the external environment, outside of the organization. That's where your competitors are. That's where your stakeholders are. That's where your customers are. That's where you get your funding. So they're constantly looking out an external environment, trying to connect the dots. What's going on there? What are the threats to my potential organization? What are the potential opportunities I can take advantage of? The key is you've got to be able to exercise great peripheral vision, to try to see around the corners, to see what's coming up ahead, because your job is to try to envision, create the foresight, to create the vision to go forward as to where you want to take your organization. Now, there's two components to strategic leadership. One is process, and the other is exercising influence or leadership. So let me take process first. Like I said, you have a dual process. One is what I just described, looking external to the organization, connecting the dots and figuring out where you want to go. That's a process. The other process is overseeing your organization. Now, this is not operational leadership. This is strategic leadership and strategic management. I like to use the analogy of a pelican. Many of you have seen a pelican gliding over the ocean, and then it dives in to catch a fish. Well, that's what a good strategic leader does as far as their organization. Glides over the organization, and when her or his direct input is needed, dives into the organization and deals with it. It's very easy to succumb to wanting to go back into the operational realm, because that's where you can exercise a lot of power, but you can't do that. You'll end up micromanaging people. You've got to stay above the fray and let the operational leaders do their job. So let me give you an example of someone that has to balance these two things. Andy Grove, many years ago, when he was CEO of Intel, now they were making memory chips, and they were really good at making memory chips. So he's gliding over the organization, making sure they were making the memory chips. But he was scanning the environment, and what he saw out there was, he started connecting the dots, and he said, Japan is going to eat my lunch. So he and his senior leadership team floundered around for a year to trying to figure out, how can Intel stay competitive with Japan? And they figured out they couldn't. So what did? They got out of the memory business, went into microprocessors, and the rest is history. They're the largest microprocessing company in the world. So what was the approach? How did Andy Grove, how does any senior leader today deal with this? How does this all come together? And the answer is, you've got to think strategically, because you think strategically to connect everything together, to make sure that your organization can adapt, that it's agile enough, while sometimes trying to figure out, well, is this where I really need to take? You've got to think strategically about all this. So when we talk about the process, that's one of the things you have to think about. Now, let me go to exercising influence. Okay? At the operational level, it's direct. It's leader-follower relationships, because people see you. They see your behaviors, they see how you act, and so forth. So it's a leader-follower relationship. At the senior level, most of the people aren't going to see you. So you have to lead indirectly. So you're leading through other subordinate leaders, you're leading through your policies, through your vision, and so forth. But you have really got to be good at personal leadership at the senior level, because you have to convince, you have to persuade so many people that are not under your authority. Because you got to get buy-in for whatever it is you want to do with your organization from external people. So if you're going to have to think strategically, then the process of strategic leadership is strategic thinking. So what is strategic thinking? It's a buzz phrase. There is no definition of what strategic thinking is. Strategic thinking is, I like to say, it's like a collage. It's a group of different thinking skills and actions that you can take that collectively, when you put it all together, you get the necessary foresight on where you want to go with your organization.